Hello, Asha.
Hello, Dambara.
It's a delight to be able to interview you. This is Ananda Music Chats, and in your case, it's not so much performing as it is with so many other people, but it is being a real proponent of Swami's music, which I know you to be, and also just your unique position of being around Swami for so long and being so close to his consciousness on all this that I thought it would be just really important to get your perspective. What is Ananda music?
Ananda music is, I call it sometimes sadhana, which is, it's Ananda music is spiritual practice. Master says somewhere that music is not primarily to entertain, but to change consciousness or to lift consciousness. He has specific words. Some people think of music as just something you do to pass the time, but Ananda music is music that you do to deepen your consciousness
Hmm.
because it's Swami actually used the phrase once that the music that he has is this ray of consciousness expressed as music. Swami stands at a point of inspiration, of attunement with Master, and then he says it through music, or rather, more clearly, music is given to him as a way of expressing it. So
Hmm.
when you're hearing Swami's music, you're not listening to music that expresses a happy day at the beach, a longing for a human love, or a disappointment that my dog died, or whatever the song might be. You're actually standing in a vibration that, if you're a spiritual seeker at all, but especially if you're a seeker on the path of Master and the masters that are with him,
Hmm.
you're standing in that vibration, and it's coming into you as music. And since we are Om vibration, especially whatever comes into us as music, it's all scientific. It's a different part of the brain. It affects us very differently. It's a direct experience. Music is a direct
Hmm.
experience. So when you stand in that vibration consistently with receptivity, then it literally changes your vibration, which is entirely different than just doing it for fun or distraction. So that's why I call it sadhana. It's part of our spirit. It's part of a person's spiritual practice to spend time with music that Swami wrote, or Master's chants, or Swami's chants, music that's spiritualized and divinely inspired.
Why has it been such an important thing to you in Ananda Palo Alto and elsewhere?
Well, for one, I've always just loved it. It makes me exceedingly happy, happy in the best sense, which is it shifts me into a remembrance of my relationship with God.
Hmm.
In the early years, before there were many other singers, although there were singers, Swamiji alone would perform, and he would bring his guitar and he would just say, "What do you want me to sing?"
Hmm.
And we would just ask him to sing, and he would just, with his guitar by himself, he would sing the music he'd written. He also sang some Indian bhajans more then, and it was transporting. It was one of those, listening to the music, and not only just him, as others began to sing it also, because it's inherent in the melody and in the poetry. It would change my consciousness. And of course, anything that would change my consciousness in an upward direction was 100% what I was trying to do. And it was, I don't want to say it's effortless because one had to concentrate, but it was easier than a lot of other things, and equally effective. I'd just be different after I would hear the music in exactly the way I was trying to be. So that was personal. And then as I was given responsibilities for sharing these teachings with other people, I would always try to have a musician with me
Hmm.
because in a 4-minute song, they could bring everybody, deeper into what I was trying to do than I could for talking for an hour. It was just efficient.
Yeah,
And also, if I just talked and nobody sang, they they could easily think they learned what I had to offer, but they might have missed the point.
mm.
But when they heard the music and then it was supplemented by what I could explain, I always felt more confident. And whenever the energy was drifting, if we just brought in music, it would bring it back into focus.
Yeah. It strikes me as listening to somebody talking, you can hear it intellectually, and that resonates a certain way, but music will bring up the feeling aspect too, which is just a really good compliment.
And then the words make sense. See,
Mhm,
otherwise, you hear the words with your mind and you reason out and you think this is what it means. But the words are also a delivery system for vibration.
mhm,
But you can just hear words and not receive vibration if you're not receptive. But the music makes people receptive. It puts them on a vibrational level, so that then the words come in as vibration. And when they come in as vibration, what happens is it's not really that you're understanding ideas. I say this because I experienced this with Swami so much. It wasn't really that his ideas were so brilliant, is that his vibration would reach me through the words he was speaking. Then it would shift my consciousness, and I would perceive realities. And often those realities were related to the words he was saying, but they weren't the words he was saying. They were the shift in consciousness that had been created.
mhm,
And the music is extraordinarily effective for creating that shift.
mhm. You've expressed that everything Swami did was pretty much a mirror of what Master did. What do you think Master's vibration was, and to what extent was Swami trying to convey that to us, and or how much of it was his own vibration, do you think?
Hmm, that's a good question. I mean, Swamiji was very orthodox, even though he was extraordinarily creative. He was orthodox in that even when he took the magnetism and put it into a different form, he was extremely faithful to the principles and to the vibration. And he was very, very careful. You may remember whatever year it was when Swami decided that he would officially authorize guitars for chanting. And he wrote a very long letter about how many years it took him to decide that guitars were an acceptable thing to add to chanting, because Master never used a
Yep.
guitar. And it wasn't that he had to decide whether Master never would have used a guitar or whether Master simply didn't use a guitar, because they're two very different things. So he was very orthodox. He always had to make sure that given if Master were facing what he was facing, that this is what Master would have done, or at
Mhm,
least it's a likely possibility that he would have done it, because you can't just go on what Master did because times change.
mhm.
Master, I mean, even now, because I'm in my 70s, enough has changed that when I talk about tuning the radio dial, and I look at the audience, and anybody who's almost 50 or less doesn't never had to tune a radio dial.
Yeah.
They just don't know what we're talking about. Whereas I had this huge console radio as a child, and spinning that big dial and watching the line go across the different numbers and hearing it come in and hear the static. I mean, it was a fantastic analogy. And now it just nobody knows what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So you can't just say, what did he do? I remember one very specific, and this is way off of music, but it makes the point. I was just going out, beginning to travel and to have to teach, and I talked a lot about relationships. And I said, "Sir, I know that Master said that one should practice perfect celibacy, and then you'll attract the ideal partner." I said, "But you've also taught me that we can't tell people to do something that they can't do." I said, "So I can't sincerely say that
Mhm.
people ought to do it, but Master, couples live together without marriage and all these things. I can't speak against it because it's just what's happening." And Swami's answer was interesting. He said, "Well, um, I can't say that," Swami said. "I can't say that because Master never did." He said, "But of course, that's what you have to say."
Huh.
Because people were playing guitars and chanting a lot, and Swami didn't stop them because the guitar was the instrument that they liked. But when he actually officially condoned it for Ananda, it was a much more serious decision. Part of it, to my mind, is you never change the teaching. If you're going to make a variation on it, you make a conscious variation for specific reasons, and never say, as as the Christians do sometimes, some Christians do, that the teaching itself has changed. An Episcopal priest friend of mine who was highly educated with degrees from prestigious universities and various things, I asked him some question about Christianity at one point, and he actually said these. He was a Kriyaban too, but he actually said these words to me. The full teaching of Jesus was not revealed. It took 300 years for the full teaching to be revealed. I said, really, listen to yourself. I said, there's a fully God realized master. He didn't know what he was teaching. It took 300 years of priests and ministers and church officials to actually figure out what Jesus said. No, it took 300 years for them to change it into something they could understand. But they didn't have the clarity. It was really clarity. They didn't have the clarity
Mhm.
to realize, well, this is what we have to say, but that's what he said. And so that's how you always want to keep that in balance and you won't be in trouble.
So that's a very interesting point. How would you recommend that we keep the clarity as best we can to appreciate and tune into Swami's music and to what he was saying through that music, or says through that music now?
A lot of it is humility and the willingness to listen and to be greatly suspicious of our own resistances.
Hmm.
And because it's fair to say, it doesn't speak to me. I don't like this song. This doesn't inspire me. If that's the truth, you can't pretend it's not. The worst thing that happens in religion is people look around and pick up their attitudes from what everyone else is doing.
Hmm.
Everyone else says this song is wonderful and inspiring, so I have to say it's wonderful and inspiring when it doesn't move me at all.
Hmm.
Swami wrote 400 pieces of music. I mean, people are bound to have their favorites, or let me say, it would be natural to have your favorites, especially as generations come and they didn't grow up on it like I did. I'm
Hmm.
surprised. I'm surprised when people don't know all the lyrics to all the songs. Or some deeply dedicated musician who's a one quarter my age will just say, I don't know that song. And I think, how could you not know that song? But then I think, of course, he wrote them one at a time, and I was able to take them in one at a time. I didn't walk into a room full of sheet music that I had to try to
Uh-huh.
master all at once. But I think sincerity is everything on
Hmm.
the spiritual path, and openness, and the willingness to try, because we're trying to transform our consciousness. And music, as Swami says, not only reflects consciousness, it creates it.
Hmm.
So you listen to a song and say, well, I don't like that. I mean, yeah, you don't like it. I might not like to meditate or do Kriya either. And I certainly don't want to have to give up my ego. And, it's just like there's a lot of things I don't want. But the fact that I don't want it is interesting, but not really, well, as they say in the legal world, it's not dispositive of the issue. It doesn't dispose of the issue. It's interesting, but not dispositive. It's like, okay, I'm not in tune with this, but I should try to be in tune with this. I should try to find a way, a sincere and honest way,
Hmm.
to try to find a way to enter into the spirit of what's here because it is my path.
Yeah.
And we just deny ourselves a great aid on the path. Somebody has their hand out and they're going to help pull us up the hill. There's no point in keeping our hands in our pockets. We might as well, take the hand that's offered.
Yeah.
But we might have to discipline ourselves or try. And everybody's different. Music speaks to me. I'm not a musician myself, but I've been a musician for many lifetimes. It just speaks to me.
Hmm.
But that's my karma.
So for folks like you and me that the music really speaks to, how do we respond to, well, for example, people who are musicians or songwriters and have their own songs? And I know that there's always been a little bit of, you know, controversy or tension when people want to express their own music. Yay or nay, is it okay with Ananda? Do other people approve of it? That whole thing. And some actually do kind of get into the standard lore, but many don't. So just what's your perspective on that? What's the attitude that's good to have?
It's a very tricky business, that one. Um, let's talk about art in general. Swami talks about originality in art, imitative versus original. And he makes a very strong point that original means um, emanating from a person's point of origin, meaning that it's a true expression of who I really am.
Hmm.
And that is a different standard than whether it's, from a technical point of view, a fine piece of music. If it's a genuinely original piece of music, it has the sincerity of the person's vibration. It might be simple, might even be primitive in its expression, but if it's deeply sincere, there will be a certain charm to it. You know,
Hmm.
in painting, primitivism, some primitive paintings still carry a wonderful uplifting vibration because of the origin. They come from a person's. This is a true expression of who I am, and who we are artistically is just wildly different.
Hmm.
And there's another kind of creative expression, which is imitative, which is this is, I've heard a lot of other songs that are a lot like this one, so I put my words to something and I put my chords or my melody to it, but really it sounds like whoever was the popular one. And some of those songs could be nice. It's not that that good music, relatively speaking,
Hmm.
can't be created, and there's no harm even in the person doing that if it gives them joy to do it.
Hmm.
But since Ananda music is primarily sadhana, it's not whether it's enjoyable music, it's whether or not the vibration of it actually shifts consciousness and shifts consciousness toward toward the divine. Because one of the things about Swami's music, which is why a lot of people don't like it, Swami's music has deep feeling, but it's not at all emotional.
Hmm.
And when we're accustomed to feeling and emotion being the same thing, and emotion being feeling that seeks its fulfillment outside itself. And when feeling is turned into emotion and starts drawing us outside ourselves, that's what we're all used to. And then, I mean, Master said, people fall in love to romantic songs and then they wake up a few years later and don't know how they got there because all that music arouses all this longing. Then you see someone and you're hearing the song and you think that they're going to solve it for you. For us as devotees, if the songs are too emotional, we might like them because we're more accustomed to that.
Yeah.
But the only thing I have to say is we have to be careful. It's not that there's no place for it, it's just we have to be careful with it.
Hmm.
And if I myself am writing music, I know a lot about how this works in terms of writing words,
Mm.
but I think it's the same process. I remember, on different occasions, I remember something I wrote that I was fairly pleased with. And Swami said, it's good. It was a little story. He said, it's good. But then he said, it's mental.
Hmm.
And as soon as he said that, I knew exactly what he meant. It was that I created it from my mind. It wasn't like I had a, a ray of consciousness that I was putting into words. And he said, you can publish it if you want. This is how most people write.
Hmm.
And I never did, and I never would, because as soon as he said that, I knew just what he meant.
Hmm.
He was very, very, very hard on me in terms of teaching me to write. I say that because in retrospect, I realized that he was, because he knew what I was capable of and he
Hmm.
wasn't going to settle for less.
Hmm.
So when you come back to people writing music at Ananda, I mean, Swami himself lamented the fact that there weren't more composers at Ananda. And he said he saw that it was a difficulty because he'd written so much music and there was a kind of slight anxiety about writing music that was good enough. For some reason, people feel quite free to write books. They don't
Hmm.
have that same anxiety. Many Ananda people write books, but many fewer musicians write music.
Hmm.
And it's hard for me to believe that we don't have more composers in our community. So, I mean, specific advice to a young man who wanted to write music, he said specifically, your music is imitative. If you wait and get in tune with my music, he said, then you'll be able to write original music because, and Swami said, he put it this way, it's awkward for me to say this, but if you get in tune with the music that has come through him, Swamiji, you'll get in tune with yourself.
Hmm.
And then your music will be original. And it may not be anything like mine. There was a woman who didn't live at the village, but she was associated with Ananda, and she wrote beautiful music.
Hmm.
And Swami really felt she was writing deeply original music, but he didn't feel it was Ananda music. It was beautiful music, and he encouraged her to sing and write and compose, but it was a slightly different vibration. And he didn't feel that it was, he felt for her sake, it should be her music,
Hmm.
not just sort of swept into the Ananda canon.
What do you do when you're a musician like that and you are feeling inspiration and it is original, and yet you know that it's, or you've gotten feedback that it's not Ananda music.
Well, it's not going to be just like the choirs are not going to start singing it. We're not going to start making half of Spiritual Renewal Week, the songs that you've composed. I mean, that was sort of the level on. His words were quite simple: find your audience. And he didn't say that no one at Ananda would love her music, because many people at Ananda loved her music, including me. I mean, many of her songs were absolutely wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't embrace all of them, but many of them were wonderful. She was an extraordinary performer and singer. So I was part of her audience, but Spiritual Renewal Week wasn't going to be her audience.
Mm-hmm.
So what I say to people is, be as creative as you want, but just be prepared to get feedback. Don't think merely because you're a disciple and you love this that everybody at Ananda is going to, add it to the songbook and put it in the repertoire. They will if over time it seems to match. Um, and if they criticize you, you have to listen
Yeah.
and try to do better. If your music inspires you, sing it all the time. It's like, be yourself
Yeah.
unapologetically. Just and express yourself. It's much more important to express yourself and then realize, oh, I could do this better, than to not express yourself for fear that somebody's going to say, oh, I should do this better.
Yeah.
And so it's a razor's edge, but what isn't? You
Yeah.
know, if this is who you are, if you're a musician and if melody comes to you and you're a composer, um, you have to be yourself. You can't suppress yourself. This is when suppression was the past. If you suppress it, you're just postponing. Sooner or later, you're going to have to face it. You might as well face it now.
Yeah. Well put. So there's kind of two branches of music. One is the songs, and the other is chanting.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't really talked specifically about chanting, but I know that Swami wrote a corrective in 1998 in Divine Friendship in the chapter on chanting that you're familiar with. And he, in that, talked a lot about chanting and about Master's Ray and trying to tune into that. And what's your perspective on all that?
Well, that was a very hard letter for me. And I argued with Swami about it for a long time, because at that time we had a big kirtan band and we chanted almost every Friday night for an hour or two. And we did lots and lots of Indian chants, which is one of the things he spoke against. And we chanted much more than we meditated. We did everything that he said we shouldn't do. And I personally absolutely loved it. And I also felt that it was helpful to our whole sangha, as I tried to explain to him, because people were very rajasic on Friday nights. They come in from the end of the week. It was a magnificent way to change the energy.
Hmm.
He never gave me an inch on it.
Hmm.
It was very interesting. He never gave me an inch. He knew that we bent the rules. I continued to bend the rules for quite some time. And I know he's right also. So for me, it's always, that one has been a little bit of a dilemma. It's partly samskars. I believe that I spent many incarnations in some kind of a kirtan group, traveling around India, just going from village to village. And you just set me down, and I play, the only instrument I've ever played is the kirtals. And you give me the kirtals and set me down there, and I'll just be gone for as long as it lasts.
Yeah.
So I have a very real experience that takes me exceedingly deep. So I also have to separate my personal preference from Master's work. And that's where I finally come to. And that's what Swamiji was trying to say. And see, this is where he's very orthodox. He says, Master knew all those chants. Master knew that way of doing kirtan. He was perfectly familiar with it. He didn't bring it to America. And even when he went back to India,
Mm-hmm.
he sang the versions that he created.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very interesting point to me. Remind me, it's in Calcutta or somewhere where they, sang for such a long period of time, whether it was Door of My Heart or something. But that's the kirtan he brought back to India, was the kirtan he created for America.
Mm-hmm.
Because self-realization is a new expression. And we're trying to break away from that, what has been true until now, and all that iron, especially that, the Hindu tree needs to be pruned, as Swami said.
Hmm.
So just going forward, doing what they've always done in America, especially in America, where we were trying to create our own reality and not just become imitative Indians. So Swami felt that, we were becoming imitative Indians and we'd never be as good at it as they were, that we needed to be who we were. Plus, he was very orthodox.
Hmm.
This isn't what Master did. And for somehow he also felt it was very important not to let kirtan become our sadhana instead of meditation.
Hmm.
I remember when we presented to Swamiji some dances that we were doing, sort of folk style dances on the chants. Unfortunately, we chose chants that it was awkward because I don't think our dance matched the chants. The chants were too beautiful and too inward, and we were just frolicking on the grass. And it was just a real poor choice, which I didn't realize till Swami more or less said it. But then I said to Swamiji, look, sir, I'm not presenting this dancing to the chants as an alternative to Kriya. I'm presenting it as an alternative to watching a video. In other words, I'm very clear about what our sadhana is, and this isn't our sadhana. This
Okay.
is recreation. Now, I don't know where the Indian chants fit in that, but Swami was very clear about this is our sadhana. We don't want to lose track of it. And I really understood the importance of that. And that's how I finally was able to shift over more. And I've allowed the lines to be slightly more flexible because once I felt we embraced the basic concept, I did feel that a certain adaptation to the circumstances was appropriate.
Hmm.
We gradually completely changed the way we did things. And there were lots and lots of people here who were relieved and very happy that Swami had stepped in. So I'm also speaking very personally. I'm not
Hmm.
representing my whole community.
With newer folks, younger folks, who are so enthusiastic about chants they've discovered that are older chants that nobody sings, but all of a sudden they've discovered them and, oh, isn't that cool? And start doing them. And then people might give feedback saying, well, but we don't do those anymore because.
This is the balance between orthodoxy and creativity.
Hmm.
This is the balance between respect for elders and the opportunity to express your own voice.
Hmm.
And this is the difference between institutionalism and personal inspiration. My point of view is we have to be very, very careful about the vibration. It's because what we're doing is setting the tone for generations to come. And we don't have to look far to see how quickly spiritual works get diluted. So when some person who has had less experience just says, well, I like it, and we're a new generation and this is what we want, I don't think the teachings change radically from generation to generation. I remember the shortest meeting in Ananda history was this. A young man in his 30s, who was practically the only one in his 30s in the whole community at that point, called a meeting with Swamiji and some of us who were not in our 30s anymore to talk about how to attract more young devotees. And it was a meeting outside by the pool, and there was about 6 or 7 of us there. And so we sat down for the meeting, and the young man, said, I want to talk about how to attract more young devotees. Swami said, there's no such thing as young devotees. There's just devotees. Shall we have tea? Because he just didn't buy it. He
Huh.
didn't buy that there's any fundamental difference just because of the age of your body. Now, there are generational differences in the sense that the delivery systems, the fashions, the speech, the images, we grow up with different things. The millennials have grown up with a whole lot of things that are still alien to me. You need to be aware of the world around you and not just cling to what's familiar to you. So it's an art. It's an art on both sides.
Hmm.
But I think about this because Swamiji had the magnetism and the universal respect from all of us that even if you didn't get it, you didn't dare reject it. That's like with that chanting letter. I argued every way I could argue. And then when people here would sort of say, what are we going to do? I said, believe me, I've represented Mark point of view as strongly and as persistently as I can represent it. And I'm getting nowhere. So we're just going to have to figure out how we're going to adapt to this.
Uh-huh.
And there was no resentment to it. It was just, I didn't quite understand it, but he has the power to, um, to inspire cooperation in me rather than rebellion. I understood, and I understood from the very start why he was doing it.
Hmm.
I understood that it could, in fact, derail what Ananda was doing.
Hmm.
I deeply lamented the loss of it.
Huh.
And I still do. And every time I can sneak into that kind of kirtan, I just seize it. I'm unrepentant in terms of myself. But Swamiji himself, now here's something interesting. You see, in the 70s, we were very, very Indian at Ananda Village.
Mm-hmm.
And Swamiji often sang, he actually sang more Indian chants himself. He was selective. And he allowed some Indian chants. He said, choose the ones that are inherently beautiful, not just the ones that just wander around. And some people like Nirmala, for as an example, understood exactly what he meant, was just totally with it. She understood it. She got it. But at a certain point, and Swami used to sing these Indian, these whatever you call the long, beautiful devotional songs.
Mm-hmm.
But he said it put him out of tune with what he was trying to do. He said his draw to India was so strong that when he got into that bhav, he could not be in tune with what he was trying to do.
Hmm.
So he repudiated it for himself, because it didn't help him with what he was trying to do. So on that level, I totally understood. We're trying to as much as we are able to do, be as pure as possible, a representative of Master's vibration in everything that we do. And whether it succeeds or fails in the moment, um, or whether it has a lifespan that ends at some point, if we have been as true as we are capable of being to the vibration of Master, then we will have done our work, and over time it will serve his work.
Mm-hmm.
If we compromise the vibration, trying to be popular, trying to cater to young devotees, following our own preference, well, that's what Swami said, but I like this better. I know that's not what they say, but this is what I want to do. We may even do a good work. It's not like we'll do something bad, but if the vibration is not strong enough, it will dissipate over time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if the vibration is as true as we're able to make it to what Master would have done, what Swami would have done, then God will be able to build on what we're doing. And when you look at religious history and you think about Masters being ushering in Dwapara Yuga, and self-realization will unite all religions, and spiritual communities are the lifestyle of the future, you realize that we're not even at the beginning. We're still digging the foundation. So the most important thing is that we dig it properly. Now
Mm-hmm.
you see, this gets really tricky though, because the way people protect the vibration is they institutionalize it and they rigidify it.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as it becomes rigid, it's no longer the vibration.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you have to keep it fluid does not mean that there's no clear template. And this is where it's like, whoa, this is not simple, is it? Swamiji said, Master followed every opportunity that was in tune with the vibration of the ray that he was representing.
Mm.
And so it wasn't like he had a rigid plan. He just, when he saw an opportunity that was in tune with the vibration, he followed it to see if it would manifest. That's exactly what Swami did. When an idea would come or an opportunity would come that seemed in tune, that was orthodox but not rigid. This is, if Master were presented with this opportunity, this is what he would have done. And if we're small, it's also all right to be small. We don't, everything we do doesn't have to be cosmic in its impact. I mean, we can be creative just for fun. We can just write songs just for fun and don't have. Swami said he respected the Beatles more when someone said to John Lennon, "Do you think your music will last?" He said, "No. Why should it?" It was just like, I don't have any pretenses about what
Yeah.
I'm doing. I'm enjoying myself. I'm expressing myself. And we can do that spiritually. If this little song really speaks to my heart, sing it.
Yeah. That's good, Asha.
Okay.
Thank you.